94% of property sourcers, investors, and enthusiasts lack consistent systems that bring them property deals on a regular and consistent basis. Over the last 4 years, I've been privileged enough to try every single method there is to acquire property deals. I've generated tens of thousands of pounds, and I now have an insight on what exactly the gurus are withholding. So in this video, we're going to be ranking the best and the absolute worst ways to find property deals in today's market. And for those of you who stay till the end, I'll be revealing the absolute game-changing way to find deals right now that actually works, and we'll be going through the ways that you can implement this into your property business. So like, subscribe, grab a coffee if you need to, and let's get straight into it. So on this page, we have what is called a Mira board. So it's just a fancy way of me displaying this information to you guys. And we have a tiering system, which goes from S all the way down to C, right? So your S, thinking back to like school days, is your A star. A is obviously A, and B and C are kind of self-explanatory, if that makes sense, right? So we're going to be putting the relevant pictures into the relevant tier to essentially acknowledge how good or bad they are on this grading system. So hopefully that does make some sense. So we're going to be starting from right to left. I've covered all of the pictures with like a little bit of a yellow post-it stamp or whatever you'd like to call it. And as time goes on, I'll basically just be removing them and explaining each of the acquisition methods. So let's get straight into it. So the first one that I'm going to be removing from the right hand side is this one over here, which is Deal Sources. Now, I don't actually know what website this is. This is not any type of affiliation. I literally haven't seen that website before. It was just a Google image that I'd seen, but I thought it would nicely depict what it is I'm talking about. So using Deal Sources, for those of you who don't know, is when you basically get someone else to do the grunt work of trying to find the deal, trying to do due diligence, and essentially you just have a once over of that and essentially pay them about £3,000 to £5,000 depending on the quality of the deal. Now, in terms of the ranking of what I would say if you're a beginner to intermediate, I highly would not recommend this for two reasons. First reason is you're still getting to grips with what a good deal actually is. And so by you outsourcing that IP in terms of intellectual property, you're not learning anything. You're just paying for the fish when you should be fishing, if that makes sense. So I really wouldn't advise it for that reason. And then the second reason is it is a lot of money, especially for a beginner, right? £3,000 to £5,000 is no joke, especially when you don't even know if that deal is going to work. It's not like you have a bunch of houses in that area that are already working in terms of deals and numbers and all that kind of stuff. So for that reason, I'm going to put it on the B level. And the only reason it doesn't go to C is because if you're already working at scale, so say you are at an expert level, you do have properties, let's say in the Leicester Square region, right? And there's a deal sourcer who has another property in that area. You already know it does well. You already have a clutter of Airbnb properties in that area. You would probably want to take the deal sourcer's deal because it's a lot quicker to find such prime real estate using the deal sourcer rather than trying to find it yourself. So there is a time and place for it. I don't frown upon it. I've sold deals myself, but I don't think it's that suitable for beginners. And I feel like that's a very big misconception that a lot of beginners have, is that, oh, I can't find a deal. I'm too lazy to go and find it. I'm just going to pay a deal sourcer. So that goes in the B tier for me. The second one we're going to be ranking today is networking, right? So we usually are told to go to these kind of like pin events or these events on Eventbrite and essentially just start mingling with people, seeing what they're talking about, and essentially seeing whether they have any deals for us, right? I personally, again, do not co-sign this because usually speaking, you would go to these events and there's just people like you who are there, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially further on in your kind of journey. But if you are looking for a deal, which is essentially what this video is about, I don't find it to be a very effective method. That is not to say it can't work, but in terms of ranking, I would go ahead and put that in the B tier, in the sense that there is a time and place, but I just don't think it's that beginner friendly or helpful. Right? So networking goes in the B tier. This one is for the third option, which is referrals, right? So referrals, very self-explanatory, not going to explain what that is. I would say this is probably one that would go in the C tier. Now, the reason I put referrals in the C tier is because it isn't something that is beginner friendly. It is not something that is scalable, and essentially it's kind of just like a as and when, right? So I wouldn't refer to this as any type of reliable, predictable system that you guys can be using to scale your businesses. And if anything, at the start, I wouldn't even take a referral from someone who's giving me the keys to their castle or giving me the keys to their property that they spent so much money on. Reason why is because you don't really know what you're doing. So if you damage that relationship early on, then you might not be able to get the goodwill of that person maybe referring you to another person and another person, because, well, you took on their property and didn't really know how to operate it, right? So for that reason, for the lack of scalability, I'm going to go ahead and put that in the C category, just for those reasons I mentioned. Now, let's go on to the fourth one. And we have Rightmove. So this is your classic, just came off a course, gonna spam Rightmove, gonna call all the estate agents that I could typically find. And you guys would see that this doesn't work well at all. Like if there was a D category, I would definitely put that even below referrals. But for the sake of the fact we only have 3 tiers, I'm going to put this in the C category. And the reason behind that is because this used to work back in 2021, 2022 when I started. It was fairly still reasonable to use Rightmove. But I would say at this point that we're at, though many gurus preach about using Rightmove, it is a very ineffective method to use, because essentially these estate agents that you're speaking to, they've spent £1,500 a month to put these properties on these platforms, and they are looking for actual tenants. So when you come on there and you're talking about rent to rent, which by the way, they've heard this pitch 500 different times. If they're an estate agent that's been around for longer than 6 to 12 months, they have heard this being pitched. Do not be under any illusion from any kind of guru or person who has told you this on Instagram or whatever it is. These people already know about this, and they get very irritated when they are attracting the wrong leads. Like, just imagine for your own business, right? You're looking for a landlord who has a specific type of property in a specific place. And instead of finding a landlord, whether that's because you put up, I don't know, letters in people's mailbox, or you've plastered, advertisements across the city in terms of maybe at like traffic lights or something really random, right? And the first phone call you get, you're really, really excited, but turns out it's literally someone that is homeless, right? Nothing against homeless people, absolutely have all the time in the world to kind of give back to them. But in the context of what it is that we're talking about, that can maybe be not the most pleasant phone call that you would receive, because it's like, while I would love to help you, Mr. Homeless Man, I'm actually looking for landlords who have properties. And you've seen this ad and thought that this is something that you would need, right? So you can see how for an estate agent, when you guys call them, there's a reason they're so irritated by you guys coming on the phone and speaking to them. And for some of you guys who are at an intermediate level, you might have experienced this. For beginners, you're probably on the verge of going on the phones. This is not to scare you. I think it's good practice to speak to estate agents, and sometimes it might come off. But is this a scalable way to actually get properties? I don't think so. So Rightmove for me is in the C category, right? Moving on to the next thing, we have this picture here of a lovely lady who is at her desk. This is basically meant to represent using VAs. Now, nobody really speaks about this, and I've not heard anybody online have any type of opinion on this, but let me give you some free game. So essentially, there are parts of the world where, due to economics, they work a very stable job for much less than you would earn in the Western world. So for instance, I'm in the UK, I'm in London to be specific. The wage that someone who would be a VA in London will take will be very different to someone in the Philippines, someone maybe in Nigeria, someone maybe in Argentina, right? Because those countries are not of the same type of cost of living that is in the UK, right? So for those reasons, you can essentially employ someone in the Philippines who will basically be able to take on the brunt work of trying to cold call agents who are maybe not on Rightmove, but maybe they're on other mediums, and essentially weed out the estate agents who are ready to actually speak to you, maybe because they're newer, maybe because they've been in existence for less than 6 months, or maybe because they're desperate to get a property off their books because the landlord's been giving them a lot of stress, right? So the VA is a scalable way for you guys to get property deals. And the fact of the matter is that they are an inexpensive option when compared to things like wasting your time trying to call these estate agents or landlords yourselves, right? So for that reason, and when I say inexpensive, you're looking at probably maybe employing them for about £300 to £500 a month. Probably not the most beginner friendly on that note as well, but I would still put it in the A category because it is scalable and it is something, once you have your first deal, I would say it's definitely something you should look into. So VAs for me goes in the A tier, right? Cool. Next one that we have lock and loaded is using Gumtree. Now, I think everybody's heard about Gumtree. I'm not going to explain what that is because I think it's unnecessary. But essentially, there are a lot of landlords. For those who don't know, there are landlords who advertise their properties on Gumtree. And when I've spoken to mentors in the past and people who are, you know, in property as well, there's kind of a common consensus with properties that you do find on Gumtree, right? You're not really going to find the best of the best deals on a consistent basis on Gumtree. The rationale of a landlord or an estate agent that puts a property on Gumtree is one who is trying to cut corners, or one who cannot find the means to get this property rented out on more typical platforms like OpenRent or Rightmove or Zoopla or whatever it is. So sometimes you would find deals on Gumtree. I've actually taken on, I think, probably about 2 or 3 from Gumtree, not many. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of times those properties are not of the best standard, unless you find a lucky gem, right? So for that reason, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Just because you can escape estate agents using Gumtree. And I do feel like with enough volume, it is something that can be used, right? So Gumtree goes in my B tier for now. OpenRent, right? OpenRent is the next one. OpenRent is typically meant to be direct to landlord, but what we are seeing right now is that there's a large volume of estate agents that are basically putting their properties on OpenRent, and actually people who rent out their Airbnb are putting their properties on OpenRent as well. And you're probably thinking, if you're in a beginner kind of element in terms of your journey, you're probably thinking, why would someone who's taken a property from a landlord then try to rent it back out on OpenRent? Good question. So usually speaking, people would put their property on OpenRent after they've taken it for Airbnb or service accommodation, whatever it is that you want to call it, in the attempt to get a long-term booking, right? This can sometimes, again, for newbies, be very confusing because maybe you've scouted out like 10 properties that you want to get. And if you haven't gone into the descriptions, or the person who's actually advertising hasn't listed it in the description as, oh, by the way, this is already a serviced accommodation property that we are trying to essentially let out on a long-term basis, then of course it's just a waste of time, right? Open rent, though, is still a very, very good way to reach landlords. Deals are actively being done on this platform, and I would be lying to deny the amount of prowess that it has. It just takes a lot of skill, and I think there are different ways to go about this, which I've probably spoken about on this channel. But just for those who haven't seen, one of the ways is to recreate accounts on OpenRent. So what I mean by that is when you have an account on OpenRent, typically speaking, what happens is after you've sent a large volume of inquiries, they actually shadow ban you, which means that some of your newer inquiries, let's say you sent like 40 in 2 hours, right? For whatever reason. When you come back onto that platform the next day and try to send another 40, what you would see is a stark difference in the landlords who respond to you on the first day compared to the ones that respond to you on the second day. And it's got nothing to do with the properties. All it has to do with is the fact that OpenRent has essentially shadow banned your account because they feel that you are using their platform to essentially get deals, right? And they don't like that because OpenRent is for tenants. So, but the thing is that landlords are still interested in creative strategies like Airbnb, like renter HMOing on that platform. So I would say for that reason, if you have the know-how, which, like I said, if you want to work with me, go into my description. I'll teach you the know-how of how to use that. OpenRent is in the A category. I think it's a very effective method that, in fact, coincidentally is obviously right next to the VA method. It is something that I would be combining if I were you, right? So I would be using my VA and getting them on OpenRent to create as many accounts as possible to basically further my business and make sure that we weed out the landlords who are interested in these creative strategies from the ones who are not, right? Cool. So the other place that we have is Facebook Marketplace. Now, the verdict I'm going to give on this is a personal opinion, right? However, I have heard of people basically using this to their advantage and they've had some success. I personally don't have success with this, and I can only speak about things from my own POV, which is the point of this video, right? So for me personally, I believe that Facebook Marketplace, 90 to 95% of the properties you're going to find there are scams, right? They're going to be of properties that either don't exist, they've either been listed by people who are in another part of the country that don't even own, or another part of the world, should I probably say, that don't even own the property that they're talking about, right? So what I would advise is that if you are going to use Facebook Marketplace, make sure that you do your due diligence about that landlord. Go and check land registry as to whether that individual is actually the landlord, if for whatever reason you do get a response, which also I also feel that the responses on Facebook Marketplace are far and few between from actual landlords who are actually even engaging. Let's even forget whether they're interested in Airbnb or not, just actually engaging with you on the basis of being interested in something, whether it's that you are actually just going to rent it like a traditional tenant, or you're going to take it on for a more creative strategy like Airbnb or service accommodation, right? So for that reason, I would put Facebook Marketplace in my C tier. Absolutely do not recommend. I think it's a big waste of time and is pretty much a no from me. So the next one that we have is using letters. Now, I don't know who started talking about this, but for whatever reason, back in the day, every single kind of course, every single kind of mentorship I took on, they seemed to talk about letters, and all the people that I'd actually spoken to in real life never had success with this. And when you think about it, it doesn't even make sense, right? Because you're looking for an Airbnb property and essentially you're trying to take on a property from a landlord who ideally doesn't live in that property, or ideally has tenants who maybe they're moving out in a week or two, right? So if you send this random handwritten or typed up letter in the post to this property, then what are the odds that that property is having someone who resides in there that is the actual landlord of their own property and then has another property that they like, there's just so many kind of dimensions where it's like, this is not really the best use of time, because even if your letter gets opened, which probably wouldn't, because you don't even know the person's name, so you're addressing it to whoever this might concern, right? Which most of those letters don't even get opened. If for whatever reason it gets opened, it would probably be by the tenant, right? It will probably get opened by the tenant, and then they would probably chuck it in the bin, or they might give it to the landlord, and the landlord is probably just going to put it with the pile of other kind of junk mail. So definitely don't recommend. Again, it's probably another one that I would say, if there was a D category on this, I would probably put it in there as well. Please, guys, stop sending letters. Very big waste of time. And it actually takes a lot of time to do this, especially if you're on foot. If you're sending it manually, or if you're going to the post office and like you have a sack of letters, yeah, it's just not, it's not ideal. I wouldn't recommend at all, right? So the next one that we have, we're down to our final two, and grand reveal for the last one, so still please keep watching. The penultimate one that we have is using estate agents. So I do understand, obviously we've already spoken about Rightmove and Open Rent and Gumtree and all that kind of stuff, but there's the method that I'm talking about here is actually going in to the estate agencies and making yourself known to them to say, hey, my name is John Smith, whatever it is that is your name. Do you guys have any properties that you're currently unable to let out, or are there any properties where the landlords will be interested in a more creative solution to their tenanting needs, right? So I would say, again, probably not a scalable method, but is very actually beginner friendly. And the reason I say that is because essentially you're getting your feet wet with how to speak to decision makers that are responsible for either owning or controlling the properties that you want to essentially occupy for your own kind of profits, right? And I think this is a good way for you to get your feet wet, especially if you're a beginner. Even if you get turned down, you can at least forge that relationship to the estate agency to say, hey, okay, that's fine. Even if you don't have a property right now, it will be good to get your business card. It will be good to get your email. And I would stay in touch with you every month or so to see how you're doing, and whether we can do business together, right? Obviously for them, it's no risk to them. So 99 times out of 100, they would probably give you their contact details. What I would say with this method is to avoid the bigger estate agencies. So your Foxtons, your Barnard Marcuses, your Dexters, they are probably not going to be receptive to this at all. You want to probably target your kind of mum and pop estate agencies, or the one-off estate agencies that don't exist as chains nationwide. Right. So for this reason, I'm going to say I'll put it in the A level, just because I do feel like it's good in terms of forging relationships, and you can actually later on down the line get property deals in a way that's scalable when you have a network of estate agencies that know you, and you obviously actively follow up. Right. I would say the money is more in the follow up rather than the actual initial meeting of those landlords. Right. So the final method, which definitely, as you can obviously tell, belongs in the S tier, is, but I'm using AI. That was such a terrible drum roll, by the way. But using AI is by far the best way for you guys to use the various kind of ways in order to actually get the landlords that you want, right? And the reason AI is so good right now is because it's new. The landlords who are now being contacted using AI have essentially never really been approached at a scalable level in this way, right? So you have what is usually termed first movers advantage, when it's like you get into a marketplace early, and because of that you get 80, to 90% of the returns that you desire, right? It's kind of like if you were early on Bitcoin, say for instance, and you heard about it in 2014. It's very different hearing about it in 2025 or 2026, right? So because of that, using AI to contact landlords is by far the most scalable way. It is the most beginner, intermediate, and expert friendly way as well. And there's so many ways to go about this, which again, I have explored on this channel, right? So this is the only way that you can do this and actually create a business that has a marketing ecosystem that will continue to serve you over time. And you would have the opportunity to cherry pick the best deals for yourself and potentially even sell off the other deals that should still work, by the way, guys. Make sure you're being ethical, but maybe it doesn't align with your investment strategy. So you can then obviously profiteer off of those deals, right? So hopefully that was really helpful for you guys. Again, like I said, if you guys want to know more about how to use AI to get only the best deals in the market and have that running for you on autopilot, where you're only spending about 3 to 5 hours a week on essentially optimizing that, then go into the description where you can book a call with myself or my team in order to move forward with things. And yeah, if I see you on the other side, all well and good. If not, I will be seeing you on the next video. Take care and have a good week.